Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a seriously fascinating and, honestly, kind of controversial corner of the botanical world, the cultivation of surviving old roses. Now, if you've ever walked through a garden, you probably just stopped to admire a pretty flower, right? But beneath those petals is this incredibly rich history of empires, survival, and a pretty fierce debate among gardeners. We're going to unpack the enduring beauty of these ancient blooms, separate the totally busted myths from reality, and see exactly why these botanical treasures might be the missing piece in your own gardening journey. Let's get right into it. So, we've got to start by tackling the absolute most common prejudice out there today. If you talk to a modern gardener, you are inevitably going to hear a very specific complaint about old roses. They'll tell you they're a hassle, they take up way too much space, and here's the big one, that they only offer a single bloom each year. The whole idea is that you get this one fleeting moment of beauty, and then, well, you're stuck looking at a green bush for the other 11 months. It's a prejudice that has driven countless people away from exploring vintage varieties, pushing them straight toward modern, heavily engineered plants. But is that actually true? Do old roses really just give us one show a year? Okay, let's dive into this, because the botanical evidence tells a completely different story. The data brings forward this undeniably colorful, massive mountain of proof that shatters the single bloom myth completely. We're going to examine specific classes and varieties of old shrub roses that have literally been cultivated for generations, just to see how they actually behave in the real world. Get ready, because the sheer variety of all-season bloomers might completely change how you plan your next garden layout. When we actually look at the botanical records, three distinct classes of old roses stand out as proven all-season bloomers. First up, the shrub roses. They offer this staggering variety, everything from the absolutely stunning white Nevada to the incredibly named Frühlingsmorgen with its gorgeous cherry pink edges. Then, the hybrid musks step in. These give us continuous, super evocative bloomers like Kathleen, which is affectionately known as the apple blossom rose, alongside the beautiful copper blend Cornelia. And finally, the moss roses anchor the whole thing. Varieties ranging from the dramatic dark red Duel de Paul Fontaine to the old pink moss, which is literally the mother of all moss roses, prove, without a doubt, that these heritage plants are far from a one-and-done affair.
But wait, the evidence doesn't stop with just shrubs and musks. The bourbons and tea roses also supply continuous, breathtaking beauty. Among the bourbons, you'll find the classic flesh pink of Souvenir de la Momazan and the incredibly vivid crimson-splashed pink of the Commandant Beaurepaire. It's like a botanical work of art. And if you happen to be gardening down in a warmer southern climate, the tea roses are absolutely your all-season champions. They boast these amazing pearly pinks like the Duchesse de Brabant and the deep rose blends of the standard Maman Cochet.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this captures the intense, almost combative passion of rose hobbyists. One historical grower stood their ground perfectly, declaring, "Let no irate rosarian challenge me to a duel with weapons or words." I mean, you have to love that kind of unapologetic attitude, right? They totally acknowledge that picking the best rose is subjective, but they firmly defend vintage charm, standing firm against folks whose idea of beauty is completely confined to fashionable hybrid teas. They're basically saying these old roses can hold their own against anything engineered today. Let's move on and see how this builds into something far more profound. Because if we zoom out from the flower bed, we see the rose isn't just about botany. It's an enduring companion to the complicated, messy history of the human race itself. As these flowers have flourished, scattered, and interbred over millennia, they've actually traveled along the exact same broad paths of change, decline, and fall as humanity. Just think about the vast stretch of human history for a second. Great men and women have lived, built massive empires, and ultimately declined and died, leaving these huge gaps and long silences in our history. But, and this is the truly awe-inspiring fact here, unlike the great figures of antiquity who are gone forever, the old rose miraculously survives. And not just survives, but in its infinite variety, it grows identically to how it flowered even before the Christian era. We can literally plant, touch, and smell the exact same blooms today that existed before modern civilization. How wild is that? And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophical argument about beauty. Like, who is truly qualified to say these ancient survivors are somehow less beautiful than today's modern generation? Consider this comparison for a second. Is teenage daughter Susan, who represents the fresh, youthful loveliness of modern hybrid teas, inherently more charming than her grandmother, dressed in taffeta and old lace, representing the surviving old roses? Of course not. They don't compete at all. In a well-rounded garden, the vintage charm of the old and the fresh, vibrant appeal of the new actually enhance each other perfectly through contrast. So the absolutely crucial point here is that this isn't about picking sides. You don't have to like a rose merely because it has an ancient pedigree, and actually, scratch that. You shouldn't automatically favor one just because it's a brand new release either. The real goal? A complete botanical harmony. But you definitely have to be on guard. Do not let anyone convince you that all beauty belongs solely to today's hybrid teas and polyanthas. Many, if not all, of these surviving old roses possess immense virtue, great beauty, and a historical gravity that modern plants simply cannot replicate.
Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative challenge from the source text. If your garden currently has absolutely none of these historically rich, continuous blooming old roses, are you missing half the pleasure of your rose hobby? Honestly, you might actually be missing the better half. Have you artificially limited your own enjoyment just because of a completely busted myth about blooming seasons? Take a look at your own garden, or even your own learning journey. What vintage, classic elements are you ignoring right now in favor of the new and trendy? It is definitely something worth chewing on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy planting!